Two big pieces of economic news from Europe this week, and each reveals a lot about who Europe and Germany consider a friend and who they consider an enemy, or at least who they're against. First, on Tuesday, the EU signed a deal to create the world's largest economic area. It covers 1/3 of the global economy, covers 600 million people. That deal was with Japan, and it is the largest bilateral trade deal ever. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said, "I want Japan and the EU to lead the world by bearing the flag of free trade." Then the second event came the next day on Wednesday, when the EU slapped a record $5 billion fine on Google. The EU's justification for this fine was pretty tenuous. Google gives away the Android operating system to phone manufacturers for free, and that has led to a widespread availability of cheaper smartphones and tablets. And according to the European Union, this is a bad thing for consumers. The EU complains that Google has put conditions on its free software and that doing that is illegal. Now, this isn't the first time the EU has lashed out at a US tech company. In recent years, it has hit Apple, it's hit Microsoft, it's hit Facebook with some pretty hefty fines. It's also investigated Amazon. Now, there's a lot of hypocrisy in how the European Union does these investigations. If you're Gazprom, the shady Russian gas company that's a tool of Russian imperialism, well, then Brussels will bend the rules and let you do whatever you want. But if you're an American tech company, Brussels instead will bend the rules to make sure you get prosecuted. The Telegraph's Ambrose Evans-Pritchard has called the EU's antitrust division, the section of the EU that was throwing down these fines, he called them the shock troop of the EU power structure. They can send in SWAT teams on dawn raids without a search warrant. He wrote that the US Justice Department could never dream of acting in such a fashion. He said that it acts as judge, jury, and executioner, and it can in effect impose fines large enough to constitute criminal sanctions, but without the due process protection of criminal law. And these two stories are really a dramatic illustration of fulfilled prophecy from the Bible. If you've been listening to this show regularly, you'll have heard about Isaiah 23 and a mart of nations quite a bit. It's something that comes up a lot. So in that chapter, Isaiah 23, it talks about a mart of nations. It talks about merchants. It talks about overseas trades. It's talking about a trade agreement. And this mart of nations block that it talks about is, well, it mentions several specific nations that are in there. It mentions Tyre, which in Bible prophecy is referring to this economic power in Europe. It mentions Tarshish, which is referring in Bible prophecy to Japan. These two and several others form a key part of the mart of nations, and right now we see these two building the world's largest economic area. Now, in addition to Isaiah 23, you start to put that with other Bible prophecies, and this describes America and Britain being shut out of global trade, their interests being attacked. And what do we see now? Well, we see Europe attacking US businesses repeatedly. So these two developments from Europe this week show that Isaiah 23 is well on the way to being fulfilled. You can read much more about that prophecy and about this trend in our article Trade Wars Have Begun from the April 2017 Trumpet print edition. You can read that article and much, much more free content, all of it free, explaining world news at our website, thetrumpet.com.